Okay, now that I believe everybody is here, let us try and do it like this. So, let us begin, ladies and gentlemen. I thank all those who've decided to join us, and we may as well get down to business. So, let us begin. Introduction. John Milton was nearly 60 when he published Paradise Lost in 1667. John Aubrey, 1626 to 1997, tells us that the poem was begun in about 1658 and finished in about 1663, but parts were almost certainly written earlier, and its roots lie in Milton's earliest youth. He had wanted to write a great poem for several decades, but the Civil War had intervened. His hope was to write an epic that would rival those of Homer, Virgil, and Tasso, or a tragedy that would rival those of Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides. He had spent much of his life preparing for this task. The aspiring epic poet, following a pattern established by Virgil, was to begin with a pastoral apprentice work before graduating to the sublimatory of heroic verse. Like Spenser before him, Milton consciously followed this career. His pastoral elegies, Liquides, 1638, and Epitaphium Domanius, 1640, solicit comparison with pastoral poems by Virgil and Spenser, and Epitaphium Domanius mentions plans for an epic about ancient Britain. Many of Milton's earlier poems voice the hope that greater things will follow. As early as 1628, when he was only 19, Milton announced his epic ambitions in an English poem that he delivered at Christ's College, Cambridge, at a vacation exercise, was part of a public oration on an academic topic. But Milton turns the occasion to higher things. He says that he will one day write a sooner, graver subject that will permit his transported mind to soar / above the wheeling poles and at heaven's door / lock in and see each blissful deity. 1333 to 1633 to 1634. Already we see the kind of imagination that Milton will display in Paradise Lost, when he describes himself as a rapt above the pole, verse 23. The young Milton goes on to say that he will sing of secret things that come to pass, when Bedlam nature in her cradle was, 1645 to 1646. From earliest youth, Milton aspired to write an epic that would encompass all space and time. He did not at first plan to write a biblical epic. At a vacation exercise, he assumes that pagan gods are the proper epic deities, and that kings and queens and heroes old, 47, are the proper epic subject. Epic poems were expected to express the spirit of a nation, and Milton's initial aim was to write an epic for England. For several years, he imagined that his hero would be a British or Saxon king. Epitaphium Domanius names Brennus, Belenus, Abrogavius, and Arthur as possible heroes, while Mansus, another Latin poem written a few months earlier, mentions Arthur's Saxon wars as a potential subject. In The Reason of Church Government, 1642, Milton wonders what king or knight before the conquest might be chosen in whom to lay the pattern of a Christian hero. Or that should be a Christian hero. He plans to write in English, and so to do for England what the Greeks, Romans, Italians, and Hebrews of old did for their country. Milton achieved his goal of writing an epic in English, but in the event he did not write about England. Arthur was too fabulous a hero for high epic seriousness, and British history was too narrow a subject. Despite his claim to be content with these British Isles as my world, Milton was a man of European culture, for whom a British or Saxon subject would have seemed provincial. Provincial. He might have also had a political reason for abandoning his Arthuriand. National epics were traditionally monarchist, and an epic about King Arthur would be inescapably so. Milton could have had little use for Arthur after the outbreak of the English Civil War of 1642. Milton did not fight in the war, but he did write political pamphlets throughout the 1640s and 1650s. His first pamphlets, published in 1641 to 1642, were his five anti-episcopal tracts, urging the cause of prebibenstralism against church government by bishops. Early in the summer of 1642, when he was 33, Milton unwisely married Mary Powell, a woman half his age. The marriage was unhappy, and Mary returned to her parents' house after only a few weeks. She would not be reconciled with Milton until 1645. Between 1643 and 1645, Milton published 4 pamphlets in defence of divorce. He boldly addressed 3 of them to the Parliament, which was then dominated by prebibenstrals, Milton's old allies, against the bishops. Parliament was scandalised, and in June 1643 introduced pre-publication censorship in an attempt to forestall pamphlets like Milton's. In Aeropagitaia 1644, Milton urged Parliament to repeal its new licensing order, but to no avail. He became disillusioned with prebibenstralism, but 1648 Parliament had won the war. But the prebibenstrals were unwilling to try or execute the king. The victorious army therefore purged Parliament. Charles I was beheaded on the 30th of January 1649. The event horrified most English people and shook all Europe. But Milton approved of it, and in The Tenure of Kings and Magistrates, February 1649, he defended the rights of subjects to depose of their king. 1 month later, he was appointed Secretary for Foreign Tongues to the Council of State. In this capacity, he defended the English Commonwealth in English and Latin, and won fame throughout Europe. Milton did not abandon his poetic plans during the 1640s and 1650s, but the only original English poems that he finished in this period were a few sonnets. Critics have often wondered why he did not write more poetry at this time. Some have argued that he did, and that either or both at Samson Agnosius and Paradise Reginald, which are unusually dated after Paradise Lost, really belong to this period. Other critics have conjectured that Milton suffered from some kind of writer's block that was lifted only after he became totally blind in 1658. Milton would most likely deferred his poetic ambitions, because he thought that his political pamphlets served a more urgent need. He certainly took pride in his pamphlets. In The Reason of Church Government, 1642, he had disparaged prose as an inferior medium, in which I have the use, as I may account it, but of my left hand. Many readers have agreed with this verdict, but it would be harsh to lift it out of context, as if it applied with equal force to all of Milton's prose works, early or late, English or Latin. Thomas Hobbes loathed Milton's politics, but even Hobbes grudgingly conceded that Milton was a master of Latin prose. If Milton aspired to be the Homer or Virgil of his age, he also aspired to be the Domesticus or Cicero. He was willing to sacrifice much for his political pamphlets. He believed, perhaps rightly, that they had cost him his eyesight, and he was willing, if need be, to sacrifice more. On the very eve of the Restoration, he risked his life and his unfinished epic by publishing The Ready and Easy Way to Establish a Free Commonwealth, March 1660. All of Milton's political hopes collapsed with the restoration of King Charles II in May 1660. As a defender of regicide, Milton was in brief but real danger of being hanged, drawn, and quartered, a fate to which he obliquely refers in Paradise Lost. His blindness may have helped him to save him. Royalists were able to point to it as a sign of God's judgment. Milton suffered other personal crises in the 1650s and 1660s. His first wife died in childbirth in May 1652, just a few weeks after Milton had lost his eyesight. His infant son John died about 6 weeks later. In November 1656, Milton married his second wife, Catherine Woodcock, whom he dearly loved, but she died in February 1658, and their 5-month-old daughter died soon after her. In 1663, Milton married his third wife, Elizabeth Minshull, but relations with his 3 surviving daughters, all by Mary Powell, became strained. In 1671, Milton published Samson Agnesius and Paradise Reginald, and in 1673 he published a revised edition of his shorter poems, many of which had been written in the 1630s and published in an earlier edition dated 1645. In 1674, he published the second edition of Paradise Lost. He died in November 1674. In his house in Burnhill Fields, his friend Kyrak Skinner relates that he died in a fit of the gout, but with so little pain or emotion that the time of his expiring was not perceived by those in the room. Tragedy or epic? We do not know when Milton decided to make the fall of man the subject of his epic. His initial plan had been to treat this subject in a tragedy. 4 drafts for such a tragedy, one with the title Paradise Lost, survival in a manuscript in Trinity College, Cambridge. The drafts resemble the completed Paradise Lost in some details, and it is possible that some parts of the poem we have were written first for a tragedy. Edward Phillips, Milton's nephew and biographer, reports that the opening lines of Satan's address to the sun were shown to him as the very beginning of a tragedy several years before the poem was begun. Aubrey says that Phillips saw the lines in about 1642. Now, if this is right, Milton was writing a tragedy of the fall at the very time that he was planning an Arthurian epic. At some later date, he realized that the subject he had intended for tragedy was better suited to his epic. Milton was long choosing and beginning late, but he eventually matched the right subject with the right genre: war. The traditional epic subject did not suit his poetic temperament or his exalted notions of moral heroism. Paradise Lost does not include some fighting, but its main action is very simple. 2 people eat an apple in a garden. This would have seemed absurd to Homer or Virgil. Even the Christian poet Torquato Tasso, 1544 to 1595, chose a military subject, the First Crusade, for his epic Jerusalem Liberator, otherwise known as Jerusalem Delivered. Rejecting this long tradition, Milton claims that his own subject is not less but more heroic than the wrath of stern Achilles. Paradise Lost attains epic sublimity. The epic form gave Milton a license to cover vast tracts of space and time. Spatially, the actions range over the whole Earth, throughout the universe, and beyond the universe to heaven, chaos, and hell. The action extends back in time before the creation of our universe, to the begetting of the Son of God, and forward to the second coming. Milton would have forfeited this cosmic sweep had he presented the action of a stage. The drafts in the Trinity manuscript follow the classic limitation of a single place. The war in heaven is related in a chorus. The temptation takes place offstage, and God and the Son never appear or speak. As Helen Gardner points out, the great advantage of handling this story in epic form was that it made possible a far more dramatic treatment than would have been possible within the limits of drama. Milton did well to choose this epic form, but would it be rash to suppose that his original plan left no trace on the poem we have? More than any epic poem before him, Milton makes use of soliloquy, a characteristic feature of Elizabethan and Jacobean tragedy. The lines that he showed Phillips are part of a soliloquy, originally intended for the very beginning of a tragedy. They resemble the opening lines of Asclepius, Prometheus Bound, and Euphrates the Phoenician woman, both of which begin with an address to the sun. Satan has 5 soliloquies in Paradise Lost, and Adam and Eve speak soliloquies when they are fallen or about to fall. Critics often say that the characters of Paradise Lost do not soliloquize until they are fallen, but the good angel Abdiel soliloquizes, and Adam's first words on waking into life are an address to the sun. The very structure of the first edition of Paradise Lost, 1667, might owe something to English tragedy. This edition was printed as a poem of 10 books. The 10 books became 12 in the second edition when the original books and 10 were split in 2. Critics sometimes see the original 10 books as forming 5 dramatic acts of 2 books each. There might be something to this, but a 10-book epic would not have looked odd in the Renaissance. Camille's Portuguese epic, the L'Histoire, 1572, has 10 cantos, and Tasso's Jerusalem Delivered, 1580 to 1581, has 20 books. Homer's Iliad and Odyssey have 24 books each, so a 10-book epic would have had the same relation to Tasso that a 12-book epic has to Homer. Milton frequently alludes to Tasso in Paradise Lost, and his devils may have many features in common with Tasso's Saracens. But it is Virgil's Aeneid that provides the clearest model for the 12-book structure that Milton eventually chose. Oh, 1 second here, I just found somebody in the chat. Hello, if you need real free and high quality service to increase your views, check stream details. Oh, it's somebody just trying to promote something. Okay, I apologize. And they must have left. Now let me see. Where was I? Milton continuously alludes to his epic predecessors, but there is a disagreement among critics as to how or even whether he sets his poem within the epic tradition. Some critics see Paradise Lost as an anti-epic that pointedly rejects the martial and imperialist values traditionally associated with the epic genre. Others see Milton as renovating a tradition that he loves. The question is closely related to that of Satan's heroism. For much of this traditional epic material in Paradise Lost clusters around Milton's devil. In the first 2 books, especially, it seems that Satan will be the hero of a poem like Virgil's Aeneid, but Milton then takes his poem back to Book 3, and offers a different kind of heroism in the Son of God. The Son's offer to die for mankind when no one else will do so clearly looks back to the moment when Satan alone volunteers to seek out the new creation and destroy its human inhabitations. Both episodes are loosely modelled on Iliad's Iliad 7:92-93, where Ajax alone will accept Homer's challenge to single combat. Satan's speech also echoes Spyridon's praise of duty, Iliad 12:310-316. Milton certainly exalts Christian above pagan heroism, but it need not follow that he therefore scorns pagan epic. Readers must finally decide for themselves whether Milton satanizes the epic or measures against Satan an epic standard and finds him wanting. Nakedness. Had Milton stuck with this plan to present the fall as a tragedy, he would have faced one insuperable obstacle. Adam and Eve could not have appeared naked on stage. Milton would have had either to garb them in flesh-coloured robes or keep them off stage until after the fall. He probably intended to use flesh-coloured robes when he prepared his first outline for a tragedy. This early draft, a bare list of dramatis personae, names Adam and Eve with the serpent. The later drafts keep Adam and Eve off stage until they are fallen or clothed. The third outline, Paradise Lost, has Moses explain in a prologue that sinful mortals cannot see Adam in the state of innocence. The final outline, Adam Unparalyzed, has Adam and Eve make their first entrance confusedly covered with leaves, having by this time been seduced by the serpent. These later outlines escape the absurdity of flesh-coloured robes, but only at the price of limiting the dramatic action. By choosing the epic form, Milton gave himself the freedom to portray Adam and Eve before, during, and after the fall, and to make naked majesty a major theme of this poem. This was a bold decision, and we should not take it for granted. One of the most remarkable things about the poem we have is that the two main characters, and the angels, are naked for most of the action. Milton gave nakedness a heroic treatment. In this, he is strangely closer to Marlowe. Marlowe's comic erotic poem Hero and Leander, 1598, is worlds away from Paradise Lost in tone and mood, but it supplied Milton with some flirtatious raw material. Leander is unembarrassingly in the raw for much of Marlowe's poem, and even the bashful hero stays not for her robes. When she leaps from bed to welcome naked Leander at the door, Hero's robes warrant a closer look. Her wide sleeves green, and bordered with a groove, where Venus in her naked glory strove, to please the careless and disdainful eyes of proud Adonis that before her lies. Milton alludes to those lines twice in Paradise Lost. He borrows the phrase naked glory when he tells how the fallen Adam and Eve cover themselves with leaves. Oh, how unlike / to that first naked cover themselves with leaves. To that first naked glory. His other allusion occurs when he likens Eve to the fairest goddess Fengad / of three that in Mount Ida naked strove. This refers to the beauty contest in which Juno, Minerva, and Venus strove naked for the apple of discord. Paris awards Venus the apple, and so precipitated Troy's fall. Eve, too, will win an apple and bring about a fall. The smile is ominous, but the allusion to Marlowe, signalled by naked strove, still credits Eve's nakedness with heroic splendour. There is a difference between the two poets. Marlowe evokes a sense of grandeur only to mock it. Venus in her naked glory strove / to please. David Lee Miller sees a comic deflation here. Strove appears in the emphatic position at line's end, its sense of power and exertion amplified by naked glory. But what follows the line break is an ironically inappropriate complement to the verb. The sense of mighty contest collapses into mere exhibition, as we discover that Venus in her naked glory strove only to be gloriously naked. Nakedness for Marlowe is exhilarating and ridiculous. Milton borrows Marlowe's exhilaration and discards his ridicule. There is nothing mere about Eve's naked majesty. But Eve undeckened, save with herself more lovely fair than would nymph or the fairest goddess feigned. Of three that in Mount Ida naked strove, stood to entertain her guest from heaven. Where Marlowe's mighty line collapses, Milton stands firm. The heroic strove reinforced, not mocked, by the alliterating stood. Stood implies moral as well as physical demeanor. And want to become famous by followers, and now the stream is just going to get raided by bots at this point. But oh well. Yeah, you win some, you lose some. Stood implies moral as well as physical demeanor. For standing, especially in Milton, is the opposite of falling. The heart of the passage is that superb phrase. The heart of the passage is that superb farce, undeckened save with herself. This too might glance at Marlowe, for Hero was quite literally bedecked with Venus's naked glory. Eve wears her glory in her own person. Milton gives Adam's nakedness an even more exalted treatment. At one point, he makes it a vehicle for his most cherished political convictions. Meanwhile, our primitive great sire, to meet his godlike guest, walks forth without more train, accompanied than with his own complete. Perfections in himself was all his state, more solemn than the tedious pomp that waits on princes when their rich retinue long of horses led and grooms besmeared with gold, dazzles the crowd and sets them all agape. Satirists have often used nakedness to punctuate princely pretension, but Milton's satire is sharper for not equating nakedness with shame, and not stripping the emperors of their new clothes. Here the exhilarationist royals bring shame on themselves by flashing flashy habiliments. It is naked Adam who is truly solemn. Grand imposing Milton drives the point home with a lovely pun on state. When kings parade in state, they flaunt themselves with great pomp and solemnity, with a great train, with splendid or honorific trappings and insignia. Milton plays on that sense, but the state that Adam carries in himself is all the more magnificent for meaning bodily form and stateliness of bearing. There might be a topical reference in these lines. The most spectacular display of royal pomp in all of English history occurred on the 29th of May 1660, where the restored King Charles II made his triumphant entry into London. One historian calls it the most momentous day of the century. Tens of thousands of people lined the royal route from Rochester to London, some climbing trees to see over the crowds. Flowers and herbs were strewn before the royal coach, and the streets of every town were hung with garlands. 50,000 horse and foot acclaimed the king at Blackheath, and at St. George's Fields the royal train was joined by the Lord Mayor of London, and the aldermen, wearing scarlet robes and golden chains. The rich retain long, crossed River London Bridge at 4:30 in the afternoon. A troop of 300 horse, dressed in cloth of silver doubtlets, led the way, followed by other uninformed regiments, and 2 trumpeters. With His Majesty's arms, next came 80 sheriff's men in red cloaks laced with silver, 600 livered horsemen with a kettle drum and 5 trumpets, the city marshal with 8 livered footmen, the sheriffs and aldermen in their scarlet robes, heralds with trumpets and maces, and the Lord Mayor with a drawn sword. The king followed on a white horse, sporting a plume of scarlet feathers in his cap. More regiments stretched behind as far as the eye could see. Stands for spectators had been erected all along the procession route, and people watched from every window. The streets were hung with tapestries, fountains ran claret. The dazzled crowd was all agape. The shouting, the cannoneers, the cries of "God save the King" were deafening. For John Milton, then hiding in Bartholomew Close, in peril for his life. It must have been a barbarous dissonance. How typical of this poet to recall Charles's triumph and mock it with one naked man. Even as he mocks, Milton takes the nakedness entirely seriously. Milton's Cosmos. For Renaissance literary theorists, a defining feature of his epic was Margalivia, the marvellous, in his Discourses on the Heroic Poem, 1594. Tasso argued that epic has the specific purpose of moving the mind to wonder. No epic has been more celebrated for sublimetry than Paradise Lost. Milton's peculiar power, writes Samuel Johnson, is to astonish. He seems to have been well acquitted with his own genius, and to know what it was that nature had bestowed upon him, more bountifully than upon others. The power of displaying the vast, illuminating the splendid, enforcing the awful, darkening the gloomy, and aggravating the dreadful. The power Johnson describes is most evident in Milton's vast, splendid, gloomy cosmos. This contains much else beside the created universe of stars and planets. Heaven, hell, chaos, and night all lie outside the stellar universe in Milton's scheme of things. Milton's cosmos is infinite, his universe large but finite. Milton usually depicts the universe as an earth-centered, but he often hints that it is the sun-centered, and at one point he boldly suggests that every star might be a sun with its own solar system. The universe is spherical in shape and is surrounded by a firm opaqueous globe, or hard outer shell that protects it from chaos. All around our universe lies the infinite void of night, in which the atoms of chaos collide at random for all eternity. Heaven lies far above our universe, hell far below it. The universe hangs suspended from heaven's floor by a golden chain, which later turns out to be hell, which later turns out to be a retractable moving staircase, like Jacob's ladder. Hell is not at first linked to any other world. Sin and death join it to the universe at the time of man's fall by building a bridge across chaos. From this brief map, one might suppose that heaven and the universe correspond to the splendid in Johnson's terms, while hell, chaos, and night correspond to the dreadful and the gloomy. This is the case, to some extent, but Milton's hell is not without some splendour, and his heaven is not untouched by sullen dread. Hell's first flames cast no light, but when the fallen angels rally their forces, Milton's of flaming swords drawn from the thighs / of mighty cherubim send forth a sudden blaze that far around illuminated hell. If hell has brief moments of brilliance, heaven has long periods of gloom. God hides himself oft amidst thick clouds and dark, and with the majesty of darkness around / covers his throne. so heaven resembles hell. The speaker here is the devil Mammon, who has his own dark reasons for likening heaven to hell. But we cannot simply dismiss Mammon's picture, for the Bible also avers that God has made darkness his secret place. Psalms 18:11. The vast splendid, the dreadful, and the gloomy are richly portrayed in Paradise Lost. But we do not always find them where we might expect. Our earth is a spot, a grain, an atom in the universe. But the entire universe may be no more than a speck in cosmic space. I say may be, for Milton is inconsistent on this point. Sometimes he writes as if the universe loomed large in the void. Satan describes the universe as vast and round. And Milton, in his own voice, says that hell is as far removed from God and light of heaven. As for the centre thrice to the utmost pole, the centre is the earth, and the utmost pole a celestial pole. So Milton here measures the distance between heaven and hell as 3 times the radius of our universe. A universe as large as that would be significantly encroachment on chaos. The allegorical person, chaos, certainly resents the new creation. Satan finds him encamped on the frontiers of his realm, determined to defend that little which is left. But the relative dimensions of the universe and cosmos undergo an abrupt change at the end of Book 2, when Satan emerges from chaos and sees heaven far above him. Heaven is so large that Satan cannot tell whether it is square or round, but a tiny spherical object hangs just below it. And fast, by hanging in a golden chain, this pendant world, in bigness as a star, of smallest magnitude, close by the moon. This pendant world is the entire universe, not the Earth. Viewed across cosmic space, our universe with all its stars looks as small as one of its own faint stars. Milton calls his universe, or the world. He never uses the word cosmos. I use it here for convenience only. The word can be misleading, for it means order. Much of Milton's cosmos consists of chaos, which is conspicuous for disorder. Milton never sums his cosmos up in one word. He repeatedly refers to the infinite space outside our universe as the deep, the abyss, the void, or simply space. When Satan says, space may produce new worlds, worlds means universes, not planets. The Oxford English Dictionary credits Milton with coining the astronomical sense of space. Milton probably took it from the Roman poet Lucretius, who in De Rerum Natura refers to outer space as spatium. Milton's cosmos owes much to Lucretius. Both poets depict our universe as a finite sphere in an infinite void. Both suppose that the universe was formed from chaotic atoms. Both imagine the possibility of multiple universes, and both imagine that chaos is still out there in the void. Milton's chaos seems hostile partly because it continues to exist. The more usual view was that chaos was all used up in creation. Lucretius had theorized that our universe would at last be overwhelmed from the outside. Milton imagines such a cataclysm at 9:2-4-7 and 2:10-2:15, in a line that is a direct translation of Lucretius. He calls chaos the womb of nature and perhaps her grave. But there is a key difference between Lucretius and Milton. Lucretius's universe came about by chance. Milton's was created by God. God created hell at the time for Satan's rebellion, and he created the universe soon after that. For 9 days, Satan's legions fell through chaos, and they lay vanquished, rolling in the fiery gulf. For a further 9 days, God created our universe. In 6 days, at some time during his second 9-day period, he created hell and our universe out of chaos, not nothing. We are never told whether he created heaven. Chaos resents hell and our universe as encroachments, but he never lays claim to heaven. In his theological treatise De Doctorium Christiana, Milton conjectures that God must have dwelt in a place of light from all eternity. He inclines to the same view in the invocation to light in Paradise Lost, 3:1-5. So it is likely that he thought of heaven as God's eternal, uncreated abode. Many critics infer that hell is the absolute bottom of Milton's cosmos, but two memorable moments tell against this view. One occurs when Satan stands in the open gateway of hell and looks out into the wild abyss. The repeated word abyss, which literally means bottomless, raises the daunting possibility that night has no bottom, and that up and down are indistinguishable in the void. But the most telling sign that hell is not an absolute bottom is to be found just after this, when Satan takes the plunge into chaos. At first, Satan makes good progress, soaring aloft with sail-broad wings. Then he encounters a vast vacuity and promptly plummets. All unawares, fluttering his phenons vain, plump down he drops, 10,000 fathom deep, and to this hour down had been falling, and not by ill chance. The strong rebuff of all tumultuous cloud, instinct with fire and nitre, hurried him, as many miles aloft. We should not miss the implications of to this hour. Satan's fall from heaven to hell had lasted 9 days. Now Milton imagines a fall that might last for thousands of years. The prospect of an infinite fall through an infinite abyss dislodges hell from its position as rock bottom. Such a fall is terrifying for Satan. But it is also poses a roundabout threat to God, because it makes the notions of moral and physical distance seem paltry. For this reason, some critics are reluctant to admit that Milton's cosmos is infinite. They argue that terms like infinite abyss and vast infinitude express merely a hyperbolical infinitude. Such terms, we are told, must not be taken literally, since only God is infinite. The problem with this is that it diminishes the sublimity of Milton's imagination. Astronomers and philosophers in Milton's own time were divided on the question of whether space was infinite. Johannes Kepler, 1571 to 1630, believed that space could not be infinite, for infinity belonged to God alone. Giordano Bruno, 1548 to 1600, Galileo Galilei, 1564 to 1642, and Henry Moore, 1614 to 1687, took a broader view and argued that an infinite universe would rebound to God's glory. Milton was much in common with these three thinkers. They imagined that the stellar universe itself was infinite. Milton is unusual in that he places a finite universe in an infinite abyss, and shuts infinity out by enclosing his universe with a protective shell. Critics have been hard-pressed to find precedents for this shell. The traditional Ptolemaic universe was spherical in shape, but nothing, not even space or time, existed outside it. Milton's fortified universe, is besieged by a chaos that Milton, in his own voice, calls hostile. The hostility of chaos raises troubling questions about God. If God is good, all-powerful, and the ultimate source of matter, as Raphael affirms in 469, and as De Doctrinam Christiana also argues, how can we account for the existence of an evil chaos? An evil chaos would suggest either that God is not good or that he is not all-powerful. Many critics try to get around this problem by arguing that Milton's chaos, despite appearances, is not evil but good. This argument does have the appeal of making Paradise Lost accord with De Doctrinam Christiana, which argues that all matter is good. Critics, too, who see Milton's chaos as good usually employ either or both of two arguments. Some argue that chaos is the material equivalent of free will. Chaos and free will both preclude determinism, and atomist philosophers like Lucretius and Pierre Gassendi, 1562 to 1655, have invoked the unpredictability of atomic motion to argue for human freedom. Since human beings are made of atoms, which are unpredictable, human decisions must also be unpredictable. At first sight, this does not sound like Milton, but there is a difference. Atomist philosophers reduce freedom to chance matter of colliding atoms. Milton equates freedom with responsible moral choice. When Raphael tells Adam that the decision to stand or fall lies free in his own arbitrament, he is not inviting Adam to follow random caprice. He is urging him to choose wisely. For Milton, freedom is a matter of choice, not chance. In chaos, chance, not chance, is the high arbiter that governs all. The second argument for the goodness of chaos stresses its fecundity as a womb. Milton does refer to the wide womb of uncreated night, but there is no indication that night's womb is healthy or fertile. Night is an abortive gulf. It breeds embryon atoms, but fails to give them form. The very sight of night's womb threatens utter loss of being. When Satan beholds the secrets of the hoary deep, secrets contains a pun on privy parts, while hoary contains puns on hoary, filthy, and whorish. George Chapman had written a hymn to night in which primal night, most harlot-like, her naked secrets shows. Lying behind the sexual imagery is a silent pun on nothing, a slang term for female genitals. Milton's night is a real void. As Regina Schwartz remarks, it is as if nothing that the abyss is most threatening. Night outside our universe is unremittedly dark. This will not surprise the modern reader, who is accustomed to think of outer space as black. But the interstellar space within Milton's universe is bright. In Paradise Lost, as is the Ludlow Mask, also known as Commons, Milton depicts the stellar heavens as a region where day never shuts his eye. A Mask 978. How then can he account for the fact that his terrestrial nights are visibly dark? The old astronomy beheld the darkness of night was an illusion. The darkness is not really there, but between the stars. The night sky just looks dark because we can see through our Earth's shadow. This view of our universe was standard in ancient and medieval times, and it survived into the Renaissance. The celestial heavens above and around the Earth's shadow are a brilliant blue, with sun, moon, planets and skies, stars, all visible at once. As C.S. Lewis puts it, an observer of the night sky is an old astronomy looks through darkness, but not at darkness. Satan enters our universe through a hole in its outer shell. Standing on the rim of this opening, Satan looks down into a bright universe. Round he surveys, and well might well he stood, so high above the circling canopy of night's extending shade. The circling canopy of night's extending shade is the Earth's shadow rotating around the universe, like the hand of a clock. From where Satan stands, all the stellar heavens are bathed in light, and he looks down with wonder at the sudden view of all this world, i.e. the universe, at once. A few lines later, he glides down through the pure marble air. Marble, from Greek marmoros, means gleaming. Apparently it was the invention of the telescope at the dawn of the scientific age that destroyed the old belief in celestial light and plunged the heavens in darkness. Milton's bright universe was out of date by the time Paradise Lost was published. Even Milton's universe is not always bright. Some 40 lines after his descent through the marble air, Satan lands on the earth. There he disguises himself as a good angel and asks Uriel, the angelic regent of the sun, for directions to earth. Uriel replies, "Look downward on that globe whose hither side, with light from hence through but reflected, shines. That place is earth, the seat of man, that light his day, which else as that other hemisphere night would invade, but there the neighbouring moon, so called that opposite his fair stare, her aid timely interposes. Suddenly it is day, not night, which is the merely local phenomena that light/his day. The pure marble air has become a pitch-black void. This contradiction is never resolved in Paradise Lost. When Raphael descends to Earth, he sails between worlds and worlds, like an Aegean pilot sailing through the Cyclades. These Cyclades. This lovely smile implies that the vast ethereal sky is as blue as the Mediterranean, with planets inviting the island-hopping space traveller to rest. But when Eve asks Adam why the stars shine, Adam's answer assumes a dark universe. The stars shine, he says, lest total darkness should be night regain, her old possession. Here, as in Uriel's lines, darkness is primal, not just primitive. Yet 100 lines later, Milton once again equates night with the Earth's shadow when he refers to night's shadowy cone. How can we explain this contradiction? The simple answer is that Milton has it both ways, because he does not know which is right. But we should not assume that he doesn't care, or that nothing is at stake. What is at stake is the relation of the universe to ancient night. A bright universe would be wholly distinct from outer darkness. A dark universe would be uncomfortably like the void profound of unessential night. Milton wanted very much to believe in a bright universe, illuminated by God's love, and to that end he banished hell and night beyond the walls of the universe. But night creeps back in its despite. Whether his fears about outer space, Milton shows surprisingly equanimity about one question that troubled many of his contemporaries. He has no difficulty in accepting the existence of life on other worlds. It is the thought of unpeopled emptiness that chills him. He even hints at a solution to a problem that had tormented others. The possibility of life on other worlds raises awkward questions for Christianity. The problem is Did extraterrestrials fall with Adam? If they did, God's decision to punish them for Adam's sin looks unjust. But if aliens were untouched by Adam's fall, Christ's redemption of one small world looks cosmically insignificant. In 1600, the Church of Rome burned Giordano Bruno alive because he had argued that the universe was infinite and contained an infinite number of uninhabited worlds. Milton never engages directly with the question of extraterrestrial life and its implications for Christianity, but he does hint at a possible answer. As Satan passes other planets, they resemble those Hesperian gardens formed of old. The Hesperian gardens of myth contain forbidden apples. Editors sometimes take the line as a foreshadowing of Adam and Eve's fall, but Milton might instead be hinting that every planet has its own forbidden tree, that the aliens have their own contracts with God. We cannot know, and not encouraged to ask, whether aliens fell. Since Satan stayed not to inquire, we cannot even know whether they exist, but the angel Raphael later gives a strong hint that they do. I think we'll put the brakes on the introduction for there. It's only because the introduction goes on for nearly 100 pages until we actually do begin Paradise Lost itself. But I think it will be worth noting that, at the very least, that's sort of where our journey into Paradise Lost is going to be there for tonight. Learning about many important elements, about whether or not there are questions about life outside of our planet, whether or not chaos can be seen as something either good or bad, or as to whether or not it can be said that hell is at the very bottom of the universe. But what lies even beneath that? Surely there must be further beneath it. I mean, what's beyond the surface, or even beyond the bottom end? So, I hope you guys have enjoyed this first reading of Paradise Lost. We're just going through it, and we're going to go through the introduction, and then we'll get to the text itself. Because I think it's important, even for those who are sort of like out of the loop, should at least be informed of how and where, why, what, how and then Paradise Lost came into being. Okay? And I'll look forward to seeing all of you guys again in our next reading. Take care, and